So hi everyone, thank you for joining me for this talk. I'll try to keep it brief and just share some of my insight and the insight of media and journalists from the mobile gaming industry. So the topic of this talk is how to ignite PR exposure for your game launch. And I'm just curious to know how many of you guys are developers out there who have actually reached out to journalists or media to cover your game launches. Can you just raise your hands? Okay. How many of you have been successful? How many of you guys have actually got a journalist or a media to write about your game? All right, sort of half of the crowd. So backing up a step, I'll tell you a little bit about who we are. Plarium is one of the world's leading hardcore social game developers on Facebook and across mobile devices. We have seen international success with over 130 million players across our game titles. And one of our games has recently been featured by Facebook as one of the best games of 2014. So that's a good milestone for us. Game coverage, it's definitely one of the most important things that you could do for your game. However, it's obviously not an easy task. Journalists get tons and tons of requests to cover their games. Having it done right can definitely make your game, or it can break if journalists seem to not like your game very much. The thing is that the journalists receive so much requests from developers just like you that it's hard to stand out. It's hard to really get their attention or to give them a reason to actually write about your game. And like I said, the right kind of media exposure can either make or break your title. But the thing is that in most cases, the game launch itself isn't always the big story. There's so much more that can be said beyond the game. And you don't necessarily have to take it from me. Like I said, reached out to a couple of journalists to get their thoughts on why they choose to cover specific games versus other game titles that are sent to their desk. So starting off with Peter Wellington, who is one of the editors of AppSpy, and he's a writer for Pocket Gamers. So Peter shared that it would be good if you provide them with a video or images for your game launch, and this gets their interest a lot higher to actually cover your games. So adding a video to your game definitely helps it stand out. Next up, Jennifer Allen, who is the staff writer for 148 Apps, mentioned that the main thing that comes up time and time again is knowing who your audience is. And this is a very important tip. Speaking to Jennifer, she mentioned that in a lot of cases, developers reach out to her or ask her to cover Android game titles when all she does is cover iPhone or iOS titles. So understanding who you're reaching out to, what they actually cover, what interests them, is one of the most important things you can do. Take a little bit of time, figure out who your audience, who you're actually trying to reach out to, what they cover, what interests them, and that'll make your task a little bit easier. Another tip that I really liked is what is the real story behind your game. So the game itself isn't always the story that needs to be told. Is your game, does it have some unique elements? Is there a good team behind it? Does it have unique gameplay that the journalist hasn't seen before? These are things that stand out beyond just another casual game launch or another free-to-play MMO type strategy. And that's something that we try to do at Plarium. We try to always share, what is the actual story behind the game? Why did we develop a certain game as opposed to, something else? Going back to what Jennifer said earlier, finding the right fit, and this is a tip that I received, time and time again. Really, just understanding who your journalist is, what they like to cover, what segment you're actually trying to reach out to. So, are you reaching out to a journalist that only covers iPhone games or Android games? Don't waste your time because you're just burning your bridges as you go along. So, take a little time, do your homework, figure out who you're actually trying to reach out to. What they like to cover, what platforms they choose to cover, and also what type of genres of game. Do they only cover casual titles? Do they cover MMO or strategy games? Taking a little bit of time to actually do that homework is going to definitely help you guys out. Timing is everything. This is a very important tip. In a lot of cases, developers launch their game, it gets approved on the App Store, or it goes live on Google Play. And then they try to, scramble to try to get some coverage for their game once it's already out there. The best thing to do is to try to give journalists or media a little bit of early access to the games. Have them play it for a little while, give them a week or a little bit longer before the game actually goes live. Give them enough time to get into it, to understand what the game is. And also, don't forget that they get so much requests to cover games that there's no way that they can, publish a post or some exposure for your game within 24 hours. So it's going to take usually about a week before you actually get some coverage. So, take that into consideration. Now, this is a tip specifically for developers who are launching via Kickstarter. And it comes to us from Craig Chappell, who's the deputy editor at Develop. So try and explain why the project should be of interest to the journalists and the site they work with. And again, what are the unique mechanics? What's the story behind the game? Why should they cover a game beyond the fact that you're another developer that's launched another great game or project? So if you're a Kickstarter, if you're running a project on Kickstarter, this is something that you need to take into consideration. The backstory is really what you should be focusing on. So positive vibration. This was a tip that I felt was a little bit different from everything that was said earlier, but it's still very important. And it comes from Lena Leray from Indie Games. And for some reason, and I never really took this into consideration, but I guess that developers do get a lot of pitches that aren't always very positive. Like, they don't excite the journalists in any way. They don't give them anything that really piques their interest. And she made a comment on the fact that sometimes the pitches can be depressing or talking bad about a competitor or why your game is better than a competitor. So those are things that you should try to avoid. Try to focus on the positive aspects, the positive qualities of your game, the teams behind it. Give them something to get excited about, hype it up a little bit. And again, going back to what we said earlier, add the images, the videos, the screenshots that can be used. All these things are essential towards getting the hopes of getting your game mentioned a little bit higher. So going back to one of my tips, and I try to avoid adding my thoughts into this, but I think that just to add one of my insights is that across everything that we talked about up until now, the most important thing is really building up a relationship with the journalists and the media, even if you're not going to be launching a game. Emailing them just to say that you enjoyed one of their posts, or sharing one of their posts, or retweeting or sharing, or any type of social interaction that you can have with them. Building up this relationship with them is essential, and that's something that we try to do at Plarium, not just when we need to launch a game, but also when we read something that they really like and we think that it's worth sharing through our social communities. And that's how you take your time building up your relationship. So don't just wait months for months until your game is actually launched, developed on the App Store, and wait try to get that coverage. Start building up those relationships ahead of time, and you'll be better off when that happens. So just a few quick resources that you guys can take away with you on where you can actually get coverage beyond media exposure. So I'll make the slides available to you. You guys can take a look. But I'm curious, have any of you guys used Reddit or subreddits to share the work your games on? All right, some of you have. So Reddit is a great social site with some subreddits on there where you can share the games that you've launched. There's some sites on there. There's some subreddits that are great for indie developers, where you can share your images, previews of your game, or just get feedback from the Reddit community. YouTube is also one of the best services, in my opinion, or the most underutilized social service to get exposure for your game. So if you're going to be launching a game, creating a teaser trailer, creating a full trailer for your game once the game is live, these are definitely places that you should be utilizing. We actually created a very active channel on YouTube where we create game footage, we create gameplay footage, teasers, trailers, and we're also going to be sharing some of the reviews that journalists have created for us. That's all going to be on our YouTube channel. And if you're going to be active on YouTube, a service that you should take into consideration or get to learn is Social Blade, which helps you track what are the best channels on YouTube, who are the best game reviewers, how big and how popular they are. So it's all up there. And that is it.